can do it, sweetie. You can do it. Good. Big push.
You're my freaking bro.
Gorilla just dropped cinnamon churro, which I tried yesterday, and it's really good. It's not super overpowering, which I love. So I'm gonna have this in my smoothie today. Code heaven. All right, so what's going on, guys? Welcome to today's video. Today's video is gonna be kind of all the things I didn't have time to say in my last video, which was a full day of eating. If you haven't watched that video, go check that one out. Basically, we're trying to keep our videos from being too long. You guys know I love to talk. I just have way too much bullshit to say. So we're trying to keep videos a little bit shorter. And so there were a lot of things that I kind of left out in my day of eating video that I wanted to talk about today. So come along for the ride. So like I said, this video I wanted to kind of go over the reasoning behind why I structure each of my meals the way that I do. And then I also wanted to just kind of touch on some of the bodybuilding nutrition basics. You may already know some of the things that I discussed if you have any, if you've done any research on bodybuilding nutrition before, if you're kind of a bodybuilding enthusiast, but I definitely think you're still gonna learn something from this video, even if it is just like a little hack or a reasoning behind why I do something in a given meal. So first thing we're gonna touch on as far as bodybuilding basics go, get this out of the way early, is protein. So you wanna make sure that you're getting about 1 gram per pound of body weight. There's lots of different research out there that kind of says one thing or the other, but in general, the safe bet is 1 gram per pound. It's not gonna be too much. You can't really hurt yourself by eating too much protein unless it's really, really, really high. 1 gram per pound of body weight is just gonna make sure you're covering your bases. You could even go a little bit higher, like 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. The protein source that I choose for breakfast is a quick protein source because I've been essentially fasting all night. I haven't been eating any protein while I'm sleeping, obviously. So I wanna get protein into me as soon as possible, and that's why I opt for whey, just because it absorbs quickly, digests easily, and like I said, it's gonna stimulate that muscle protein synthesis process quickly as quickly as possible. There's not really anything else that you can consume that's gonna result in faster muscle protein synthesis. You also see that I put in some frozen kale, some frozen berries, and then a tablespoon of chia and flaxseed, and that's just to get my fiber up. I don't think fiber's talked about enough, but it's extremely important. Fiber's good for health markers, it's good for heart health, it's good for digestion, it's good for gut health, and digestion and gut health are not the same thing quite. And I just, like a lot of, especially younger, recreational bodybuilders don't really know or incorporate or emphasize fiber. So fiber, try to hit 40 grams per day, maybe even a little bit more depending on your circumstances. The other thing, nutrient density. You'll see that this isn't just some like bowl of cereal with protein powder in it or fucking protein pancakes. It's fruits, vegetables, there's even fermented kefir in here. I try to pack as many nutrients into each meal as I can because obviously health is important. Health is wealth, guys. And the better your meals are in terms of micronutrients, the better your body's gonna function. And then just last thing is just ease of preparation. Like I'm not trying to wake up in the morning and throw down in the kitchen, so a smoothie or a shake, whatever you wanna call it, is super easy to make and prep. So pre-workout meal, forgot to mention this earlier, but in addition to hitting 1 gram per pound, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, you wanna make sure you're kind of splitting that up evenly between all the meals you're gonna eat. Ideally that's 4 meals. I think the research says that 4 protein feedings per day is what's gonna be optimal for muscle gain. I just do 5 because I'm hungry 5 times per day and I'd rather eat 5 meals. So I just try to have, like I said, total number of protein for the day divided by the number of meals I'm gonna have. That's just gonna be better for essentially trying to elevate muscle protein synthesis throughout the day as often and as much as possible. So my pre-workout meal is pretty minimal fat because fat takes a little bit longer to digest, and I don't wanna be trying to digest a big fatty meal while I'm about to go train. For example, I'm about to go hit legs, and that would be just a recipe for probably throwing up. The other thing about digestion is that digestion actually diverts blood flow away from the rest of the body. It requires blood flow, and so theoretically it could reduce the likelihood of getting a sick fucking pump, and we like sick fucking pumps. So slightly higher carb, just because Carbohydrates are going to facilitate performance, although my glycogen stores are already full, so that's kind of just erring on the side of caution. And then, of course, if I'm eating less fat, I want to kind of make up for those calories with carbohydrates, just so that A, I'm still getting a relatively even amount of calories with each meal throughout the day, and also just so I'm not hungry halfway through my workout, because that can be a problem too. So basically this just looks like some simple carbs coming from bread and honey, or rice, or potato, or whatever, you know, simple sources of glucose, which is what carbs are. Avocado, which is just like a small amount of fat. And then we want to get some carbs from fruit as well, just because fructose actually has to be processed by the liver before it is transported into the blood, which basically just means that theoretically we'll have glucose or carbohydrates in our bloodstream later in the workout as well as in the beginning of the workout, because the carbohydrates from the fruit, this is a kiwi by the way, again, micronutrients, they won't be available until later in the workout. And then obviously some lean protein source. I had chicken breast, but I already ate it while I was waiting for my toast. I also think this is a good opportunity to talk about carbohydrates, just because pre-workout meal is probably the meal where carbohydrates are the most important, pre or post-workout. Very quickly, you need carbohydrates if you're looking to maximize muscle gain and performance. You're not gonna, like, there's a lot of research that shows that keto, for example, you're just not going to function as well on a keto diet as you will on a diet that has carbohydrates. Specifically in the context of building muscle and performance with like exercise, you need carbohydrates to optimize those two things. I don't think there's a specific quota for carbohydrates like there is with protein and fat. So usually what I'll just do is find my protein and then find, you know, a reasonable fat amount, which I'll talk about later in the video, and then I kind of fill the rest in with carbohydrates. so post-workout meal. Not too many things to really include with the post-workout meal as far as like special aspects of it. The post-workout meal is generally going to be a bigger meal. Like I said before, all of our calories and meals kind of want to be about the same, give or take a little bit based on which meal it is. And so for the post-workout meal, obviously I'm starving right now, so I'm going to make it a little bit of a bigger meal. But otherwise, we're just hitting nutrient requirements. You might have a little bit higher carb in your post-workout meal because there's some theory that resistance training increases the insulin sensitivity of muscle cells. So if you eat more carbohydrates post-workout, theoretically, more of the carbohydrates may go toward muscle cells rather than fat cells. So I generally have like slightly higher carb post-workout for that reason. But otherwise, it's just kind of hitting our nutrient quotas that we want to hit with all of our meals. That being said, because we had fat a little bit lower in the pre-workout meal, fat is a little bit higher in my post-workout meal. And so I have opted to have grass-fed ground beef as my protein source for this meal. Grass-fed ground beef is extremely nutrient dense as well, so I try to have as much of that as I can based on my macros. So I actually have this as my protein source for the next 2 meals, this one and then the next one. Whereas like I said before, the chicken is a little bit leaner protein source for the pre-workout because we didn't want to have a lot of fat being digested. The other thing about carbohydrate intake, slightly higher carbs post-workout. Carbohydrates are a precursor to serotonin. So training really hard, you're gonna stimulate your sympathetic nervous system. So you're gonna be essentially in a fight or flight state after your workout for a little bit of time. So ingesting some carbs post-workout can kind of help bring you down from that fight or flight state into more of like a relaxed, chill state, which is better for recovery. And then I'll just take this opportunity to talk a little bit about fats because we've already covered proteins and carbs. Fats should generally be about 15 to 20% of your total calorie intake, with probably no less than 30 grams per day. That tends to be, depending on the person, 30 to 50 grams, but 30 being the lower end of that. That tends to be where we start to see hormone health take a little bit of a hit because fat plays a large role in hormone production. So if you're cutting, for example, try to keep fats no lower than 30 grams. That's very, very low. So I don't think any of you would necessarily have an issue with that unless you're like prepping for a show. But yeah, I'm bulking, so my fat's a little bit higher. I also just happen to be eating or prioritizing a lot of more nutrient dense foods like grass-fed ground beef and whole eggs and things like that, which happen to have a lot of fat in them. So my fat right now is like 90 to 100 grams, I think. So it's a little bit on the higher side. That is the post-workout meal, thought process kind of behind it. And I'm starving because legs today with Glady just... Fuck, I almost puked that everywhere. All right, so second post-workout meal is really similar to the first post-workout meal. At this point, I'm just trying to hit my calories and get in my nutrient requirements. So like I said earlier, relatively even amount of calories for all the meals, relatively even amount of protein for all the meals. And then this is, again, a little bit higher fat, a little bit higher carbs just because we're post-workout now, starting to kind of wind down for the evening. Eating larger meals will kind of like relax you a little bit. That's just a nervous system response. And I'm getting ready to kind of go to bed, right? So I'm kind of like almost backloading my nutrients just so that I'm full of nutrients when I go to sleep and those recovery processes really kick in. So talking about calories, I just want to briefly discuss calories. Obviously, if you want to gain muscle and recover optimally, we want to be in a caloric surplus, which basically just means eating more calories than you need to maintain your weight. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, already know that. But that doesn't mean eating as many calories as possible. You don't get more gains or more benefit or more recovery with more food. You do to a certain point. Like say, you'll probably make a little bit better gains with like a 400 calorie surplus than maybe a 200 calorie surplus. But once you're up to like 600-700 calories, you're just eating food unnecessarily at that point, which is gonna result in unnecessary fat gain, but not any additional muscle gain than you would have already gotten with like a 400 calorie surplus. Those numbers are just, you know, hypotheticals, but you get my point. So in my opinion, it's best to start with a smaller surplus and then add calories as needed in order to achieve the optimal rate of gain. And by gain, I just mean gain of body weight. Usually we want to aim for about a 1 to 2% gain of your total body weight every single week. That would be about the optimal rate of gain to ensure, like I said, you're not gaining too much fat and you are still maximizing your muscle adaptations, your gains. On the other hand, when cutting, I like to do it the opposite. Cut as hard as fucking possible, as fast as possible, unless you're cutting for a show. If you're just cutting to kind of like lose fat to then bulk again, which is for example what I'm doing, bulking, when I do cut, that will be what I do. You just want to basically cut your calories as low as you can possibly manage while still meeting the minimum requirements for like protein and fat that I mentioned earlier. So when I get to like, let's say 240, 245, and I'm like, all right, I'm fat enough now, time to mini cut. I'm just gonna cut super fucking aggressively, like slash my calories down to like 2,000 per day, do like tons of cardio, and just make sure I'm hitting my, like eating a ton of protein in order to maintain my muscle, and then hitting that minimum fat requirement that I talked about earlier to make sure my hormones aren't completely crashed. So yeah, that is kind of a little spiel. We've now covered protein, carbs, fats, and calories. And this is the 4th meal of the day, and then I'll see you guys at the 5th meal, just kind of talk about why I do things with my bedtime meal that I do. All right, so last meal of the day, basically, there's not really anything big to focus on other than it's another opportunity to get nutrients in. So obviously calories, macronutrients, and micronutrients. For example, these are pasture-raised eggs, extremely nutrient dense. You know, I eat 5 a day right now. That being said, the biggest thing to remember with your bedtime meal is gonna be protein. So not only are we gonna have protein, you know, a normal protein, I'm gonna call it, with the eggs, but we're also gonna have casein protein. So I have 2 scoops of casein protein powder in this shake, and then 200 grams of Greek yogurt, which is another source of casein protein. For those of you who don't know, casein protein is a longer absorbing protein, so it takes longer for the body to absorb it, and it's present in dairy products. So if you don't have access or the funds to buy protein powder, casein protein powder, then you can buy like Greek yogurt or cottage cheese or milk or whatever, and that's gonna be casein protein as well. But basically I have this before I go to bed so that I have protein synthesizing throughout the night, which is a time when I would otherwise not be eating protein, obviously. And so I'm not gonna have muscle protein synthesis elevated overnight unless I get my protein in before bed, specifically casein protein. So that is the thought process behind this meal. Make sure you have protein, and make sure you have casein protein if you want to take your gains extra serious. Is it going to make a massive difference? I don't know, but I'm in the game of hedging my bets and giving myself all the help I can possibly get and being better safe than sorry. So that's why I do it. That's the end of this video, guys. I hope you learned kind of the basics, couple little things about why I do what I do with my meals, with my nutrition in general. Appreciate you guys as always, and I'll see you in the next one.